Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate this hearing, particularly at this time. Pre-disaster mitigation has been a bipartisan favorite of this committee, and yet we've never been able to convince any administration on the 3-to-1 savings, because that's not how the appropriation process works. And we tend to matters after the fact, which is, of course, the most costly way to treat them. As far as I'm concerned, there's an elephant in this hearing room. I'm interested in unanticipated disasters, which we are increasingly seeing around the country and around the world. I think the chairman quoted, and the statistics from the CRS, 25% or so of the disasters account for 92% of the cost. One wonders how long those figures will remain where they are. For example, there are unheard of disasters in places unseen before, and the intensity of disasters has shocked the nation. I mean, who would have expected Hurricane Sandy to take out whole sections of New York City and New Jersey in the way it did? We're seeing climate disasters of the kind that were never had in that particular region before. In North America, we see 5 times weather-related events over the prior 3 decades. I don't think any weatherman told us all of these things were coming down the road. So I don't care where people are on climate change. The science is pretty clear on that. I am concerned with whether we are prepared to deal with increasingly unanticipated and intense climate events. Now, Chief Sinclair, for example, says in his testimony, comments on the increasing number of disasters in the United States, and quotes from the 9 years from 60 to 69, there were 19 per year, escalated to 67 per year from 2010 to 2014. Something's happening. He also speaks in his testimony, I'm looking at page 2, about the intensity and costs. And so when I refer to Sinclair, for example, it was the intensity that drove these matters. So I need to know whether this panel believes that the country is ready for unanticipated disasters of far greater intensity than we have ever seen before. Mr. Fugate, I'd like to go down the line. Are you ready for that? All this talk about pre-disaster mitigation, that's based on the disasters we have seen. I'm now talking about the disasters we are seeing. So could I have your response to the intensity and the new disasters in places that they have not been seen before?
Yes, ma'am. Climate change is real, and I'm going to tell you how real it is. Insurance companies generally don't get into debates about public policy like that, but there's a recent article in Bloomberg that Travelers Insurance is now tracking tornado impacts in their tornado seasons, and they're seeing a climatic signal in their losses that is not sustainable. When insurance companies start telling you that the weather is changing more than they can compensate for and what their rates are, they're going to do one of 2 things. They're either going to increase their rates to become more affordable, shifting that to the taxpayer, or they're going to stop writing policies, shift it to the taxpayer. You have to build back, not by past data. It's not good enough It doesn't tell us what's about to happen. And we really need to drive this conversation by what is insurable. And a simple answer may be, if the private sector doesn't think it's a good bet over 20 to 30 years and won't insure it at affordable rates, maybe we're not building in the right place the right way. But our past history of weather data is too insignificant to continue to use only that to determine what we should be building to. And time again, when we've used that data, right after it, another event occurs and takes it out again. And they didn't have insurance.
Thank you. Mr. Paulson?
I think regardless of whether a climate change believer or not, it's building our homes, building our businesses, our public structures to withstand whatever type of disaster is going to be in that area. If you're in California, you build to earthquakes, or you build to wildfires. You have a sustainable space around your house. You can't have a wood shingle roof anymore. In South Florida, we build our homes to withstand hurricanes. We know we're going to get 150-mile-an-hour winds, and we design our homes to deal with that. So I think if we start looking at that part of it, being very pragmatic, and saying, okay, we need to, instead of our home being blown down every time, why did it blow down? Or why did it flood? Or why did it catch on fire from a wildfire? And let's build our homes to withstand those types of things. So regardless of how many come along or how intense they get, every time we have damage, let's step back and say, okay, why did it have damage, and what can we do to mitigate that? I think that's the approach we need to take.
Mr. Phelps?
Thank you, Congressman Norton, for the question. Speaking from Oregon's perspective, certainly we've seen increases in all types of weather, and catastrophic wildfires has been a particularly big issue for us. We in emergency management often find ourselves in the business of consequence management. I'm not quite as concerned or have less control over why the wildfires are starting so frequently and burning so hot and in such large areas as how we can prevent those fires from burning, quickly extinguish them, and probably most importantly, prevent the loss of lives and property in those fires. So Oregon's perspective, we take an all-hazards approach to how we prepare and mitigate against disasters. We've got rugged coastline, agricultural valleys, alpine mountains, and high desert. It's a big task to look at that hazard profile and try to find an effective statewide mitigation strategy to do so. But the work that we're doing at the state, and probably more importantly, the work of our counties and tribal governments in their areas is more valuable at buying down some of that risk.
With your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, could I get the next two, their responses to this one question I asked? Mr. Sinclair.
Thank you very much for the question. We currently have a 40,000-acre fire burning today in Arizona. The Okefenokee Swamp is in the process of burning. Wildland season used to be about an 85-day. It is now 365 days. When you take a look at the if you take a look over the next 20 years, it has typically been in the Intermountain West where the major fire problems have been. The scientists tell us that that fire problem is going to go across the hardwoods of the Plain States up in the Great Lakes region all the way into the Mid-Atlantic and into the New England states. Last year we saw disastrous fires occur in Kentucky and Georgia at a time when we wouldn't have done that. The answer to your question is, are we ready? It depends on the community. One of the things that we're looking at is that in the Intermountain West, we're educating the communities as it relates to defensible space, fire adaptive communities, the Ready, Set, Go program. If there's anything that CNN, MSNBC will teach us is that every community across this great land needs to be prepared for the wildland problem. And so are we there yet? No. That is the reason why we need the codes. It is the reason why we need to have a very open dialogue about where we're building buildings and what we can do to make them fire resistant. It is also vital that, because every one of those buildings is going to have people in it, and making sure that people are prepared for all types of hazards. Whether or not it's a wildland fire, whether it's a tornado, whether or not it's an earthquake, we need to make sure that we've got resilient communities and continue to educate.
Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. I'd get, especially from the insurer, I'd like to get a final response.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great question, and we spend our time from the insurance sector trying to expect the unexpected. and build for that. And I think in the testimony that I provided, as we talked about the scientific research at the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, the one thing that we know is that the unexpected is going to continue. And it's going to continue to rise as we talked about the frequency and severity. So the core for us is about investing in scientific research about what we can do to mitigate the unexpected losses that are coming. Many folks have seen the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety where cars are crashed, and think about the decades that that work has gone on to improve safety on our roadways. That same effort is being aggressively applied to the property side now at the Institute for Business and Home Safety, and we believe that the building codes and the research that we're finding will help us mitigate loss that will occur, because we know that these trends are going to continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you. Chair recognizes